Coming up on the podcast, some people never give out 5 stars because they have their reasons for it. Some people, a 3-star review isn't necessarily bad. Like, it's partly cultural, and some people only give out 5-star reviews. You're listening to the Book Nerd Podcast, a virtual book club for readers of mystery, thriller, and suspense novels. Twice a month, I will bring you a short discussion about what makes a great thriller novel, as well as latest reads over a cup of tea. And who am I? I'm your host, cozy mystery writer and thriller author, Amelia D. Hay. Hello, book lovers. In this episode of the Book Nerd Podcast, I'm going to discuss my favourite mystery and thriller novels that I read in 2021. I know what you're thinking, it's been a while and 2021 is definitely over. So hear me out. I wanted to put a bit of distance between the end of 2021 and my reading because I wanted to discuss the books that stood out to me the most. Because I think from memory I read... Let's check. You know what? I'm going to put up the number of books I read in 2021 on the screen so you can see it. And I do feel like when people dive into these, this is what I read in 2021 or this is what I read the previous year, I feel like it's done too early and there's not enough distance to really look back and say these books stood out to me the most. They were the best, because I feel like if you're going to say the best books, my favorite books, you want to talk about the books that really stood out to you the most. And I think time is a good test for that. And I realize not every book that you write, and I'm saying this as an author, will be one of those books for every reader. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? So before I dive into my favorite books and talking about how I rate books and all of that important information, I just want to read a quick disclaimer just for the sake of transparency. All of the books in this episode were purchased with my own money and not gifted to me by publishers, publicists, or agents, and all opinions are my own. And I do feel like as a podcaster, it's really important for me to point that out. But without further ado, let's get into the episode. So before I talk about my favourite books, I want to discuss the elephant in the room. How do I rate books? Because some people never give out 5 stars because they have their reasons for it. Some people, a 3-star review isn't necessarily bad. Like, it's partly cultural, and some people only give out 5-star reviews. So it's important to talk about it so you understand the thought process behind how I've constructed this list. So most of the books on this list I have rated 4 or 5 stars. On rare occasions, I will rate a book 3 stars. Usually this means the book is okay, but I probably won't read any others in the series. And on one occasion I did 3-star a book because the story had so much potential, fell short, but I still went on to read other books in the series. As an author, I don't feel comfortable panning another author's book because I realize that if I feel a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean other people will have the same experience. It really is down to the individual. Reading can be a very individual experience. And in saying that, if I don't like a book, I simply won't rate it. Or if I feel like I would 3-star a book, sometimes I just don't do it because I feel it feels obnoxious to me. So I try and make sure that if I want to reread the book or read more books in the series, that I will give it 4 or 5 stars. Enough of that. I will point out some of the books in this list are actually ebooks, so I'll flash the cover on the screen as I talk about it, and some will be physical books. So the first book is A Dying Shame by Elizabeth Spann Craig. As you can probably tell, I'm going through a bit of a cozy mystery phase, and I must confess I adore Myrtle Clover. She's one part amateur sleuth and one part pain in the neck. The lovable kind of pain in the neck. I sometimes think that people probably feel that I'm a bit of a pain in the neck, so maybe this is why I like her. Along the crime-solving adventures is her reluctant sidekick, and he truly is reluctant. Like, she drags him to things, and he's usually there saying, "Oh, Myrtle, you shouldn't interfere," basically. This book, A Dying Shame, and the rest of the series is light-hearted, witty, and intriguing, and everything you want in a cozy mystery. And just based on the title, the murder does have something to do with the hair salon, which is why it's a dying shame, as in hair dye. But yeah, I really do like the tongue-in-cheek sort of punny titles of cozy mysteries, because I don't know, there's something, what can I say, I love a dad joke. The next book is Just One Piece by Katie Grayowski. This was an excellent read. Just One Piece is the third book in the PTO Murder Club mystery series, and it had me laughing out loud on a number of occasions. At one point while reading, I received a few concerned glances from my husband. Normally, I was reading this during, obviously, the lockdown, and he works from home, so I'm doing my work, listening to this particular audiobook, and I'm laughing, and he's looking over at me going, "What is she on?" He was a bit concerned. Even though this was the first book in this series that I read, I could still follow the story. After I finished reading this book, I was very tempted to go back and read the previous novels. And that is something I did do in 2022. The next one is The Lost Library by A.M. Dean. From the second I read the blurb for The Lost Library, I fell in love with the intriguing quest to find the Lost Library of Alexandria. The quest was full of action, fact-finding, fascinating locations, and history. However, the ending I had imagined was not the ending I received. After careful consideration, I still found this book enjoyable, even though it diverged from my expectations. Quite tragically, this series is technically a 2-book series, or a duology, but I still recommend this book to lovers of Dan Brown and history-inspired thrillers. I'm not going to lie, I'm devastated that there's no more books, and this writer seems to have fallen off the face of the earth. So after that second book, there's definitely not going to be many more. Next up is The Relic by Preston and Childs. What kept me turning the page was the creepy creature stalking the halls of the Natural History Museum late at night, picking off its victims one by one. Even though months have passed since I read this novel, that's the one thing I remember the most. This novel is a unique blend of mystery, suspense, horror with a touch of sci-fi. I particularly loved the museum setting and the science and anthropology thrown in with the non-stop action. At this stage of the series, I wasn't invested in Special Agent Pendergast as I turned the pages of the novel, but this sentiment has changed as I've read more books in the series. Yeah, with The Relic, this creature, it's definitely something that I still remember to this day, and let's just say I won't be going to the Natural History Museum in New York late at night on my own, and I'll leave it there. But it was such a good read though. I have gone back and started to read other books in this series, and they're definitely very enjoyable, but this particular one really stood out to me the most. Next up is The Last Templar by Raymond Corey. I think I've just butchered his last name. My apologies. A common complaint in the reviews is the switching to the earlier time period of the Templar Knights. You're probably going to guess this, but I absolutely love this. I found these parts of the story quite intriguing because I am a bit of a nerd and I wouldn't mind a bit of history occasionally. As you might have guessed, based on the title of this novel, it's a conspiracy thriller with elements of archaeology, mythology, and religious themes. It wonderfully blends history and mythology together. But it's not perfect. Much like other books in this archaeological thriller genre, you need to be willing to suspend disbelief and be okay with the bending of history to suit the plot. So even though I love history and I'm really intrigued by it, I'm okay with it being bent to serve the purpose of fiction, but some people, they're just not. And if you're one of those people, do not read an archaeological thriller or an action-adventure action adventure thriller, I would stick to proper historical fiction. And what can be annoying is sometimes these books will be shelved in the historical fiction section, which is not something that really should be happening. Honestly, this is what I expect from this genre, and I read it because it's just escapism fiction and I want to be whisked away to another world. I enjoyed Tess as a character and her ability to keep going despite the obstacles she faced. I like a strong female character, but not a strong female character who's really just an asshole. You know, that woman who's, you know, she can kick butt, but she's super mean, and somehow being mean is what makes her a feminist. That I don't like, but Tess she's definitely not that. She's definitely someone who gets knocked down and she gets back up again and she keeps going, and the cycle continues and she keeps going until, you know, the end of the story and overcomes the obstacles that she needs to. And I really enjoyed that particular character. The Last Templar also has a series of comics as well, and I haven't actually read them yet. This next book, Along Came a Spider, even now when I look at this cover, what really stands out to me is the villain. Like, this guy, Gary Sunji, I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, is, I won't say too much, but he's definitely memorable, but not in a good way. Well, he's memorable because he's he's a villain. But, sorry, I didn't think about how I was going to organize these books. So I'm trying to make room on my desk for everything. Sorry, for those of you who are watching the video and wondering what I'm doing. With Along Came a Spider by James Patterson, because this is the series that follows Alex Cross. This is the first Alex Cross book, and it's the only one I've read so far. So this left me speechless as I closed the novel. The story's villain, as I was alluding to earlier, Gary Sunji, is chilling. He's creepy, but he's also fascinating. He's just, maybe the word I'm searching for is disturbing. Its central plot follows a cat and mouse game with twists I never saw coming. And this cat and mouse game is played between Gary and Alex Cross with a few other people. Yet despite the crime and suspense, there were small moments that managed to make me laugh. The characters seemed very real and they shared a few jokes between each other. And I sort of felt like these moments sort of made the characters a little more... I do believe there was a movie starring called Along Came a Spider. I think it was I can't remember when it was released. I haven't watched it, but I've got it on, it's either Netflix or Amazon Prime Video to watch. I just haven't got around to it yet. Next up is The Secret of Excalibur by Andy McDermott. I must admit, after reading the previous two books in the series, I've become a fan of Nina Wilde. Not so much Eddie, because he's the stereotypical action adventure character, and he's whiny, especially in this book. I wanted to reach through the pages and slap him. The character's British, and I'm wondering if this is just a stereotype that the author holds, or Eddie's deliberately being annoying in this book. I'm not sure what it is. So Nina Wilde and the association with the Arthurian legend is the reason I picked up this book. Like other books in this series, you need to suspend disbelief because it's unbelievable at times, especially when they start discussing and harnessing earth energy for dubious means. It really verges on sci-fi with a total lack of science. If you like books that are action-packed with a dose of mythology, then you'll love this installment of the Wild Chase series. Next up is Death and Croissants by Ian Moore. And I sort of really like the cover. It sort of looks like a postage paid envelope a little bit. So Death and Croissants is a humorous cozy mystery that had me laughing out loud on several occasions. However, there was a moment in the novel that reminded me of a storyline from the Benidorm TV series, but I still enjoyed the book. It sort of felt like a direct take from that TV show. It is super funny, but you need to be prepared to suspend disbelief. One of the things I found really annoying about this book is there are a lot of people that really hated on this. And I sort of feel like they hated the story for some reason. The review average on Goodreads was brought down to 3.93, and I sort of feel like it was definitely a solid 4-star. It should have gotten a slightly higher rating than that, because it does deliver on the cozy mystery. They do solve the whodunit. There is a bit of, outlandish sort of craziness going on, but it is quite funny. I felt it's quite funny, but it's British humour, and you need to be aware of that before you start reading the book. But I just felt some people were really harsh on the storyline, and I feel like the book delivered on its premise, but that's just me. Next up is The Midnight Line by Lee Child. The opening of the 22nd installment of the Jack Reacher series was smart, funny, but it evolved into something better. What grabbed my attention was the 3 strong and intelligent female characters. Tragically, this isn't something you always see in this genre, but back to the story. I'm not going to dwell on that any more than what I should. It opens in true Reacher style, Jack strolling through a small town. He stops after spotting a small West Point ring in a shop window and then sets out to reunite it with its owner. In the way of his mission are a series of twists and turns which kept me turning the pages. The ending came as a surprise, but that's to be expected. And what I will say is there's actually a new TV series with Jack Reacher, and the casting is brilliant because this is how I imagine Jack to be. And I think he's definitely better for the role than Tom Cruise. I think they sort of chose Tom Cruise because he's Tom Cruise and they thought he would draw a bigger audience. But I think it's on Prime Video and it's really good. And I loved the adaptation for The Killing Floor. It was good. And the last book in this, it's not really a haul, this episode, is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. And this is another book that received a few harsh critics. I think what happens is, I think there's a bit of tall puppy syndrome. You'll see, a comedian or something else branching out in what's seemingly different, although I would argue that a comedian, they write their own jokes. So they do write as a part of their job. They're not like an actor branching out into writing fiction or screenwriting, but once someone jumps out of their lane, there's a bit of tall poppy syndrome where, where people will come along and try and slice them down back in the pigeonhole where they want them to be. And I sort of feel like there's a little bit in the reviews of this. People are just incredibly harsh, and considering this is his debut fiction novel, it's a really good debut. Like, I'd be super thrilled with this if this was my debut novel. But anyway, I'll put back to the review. A bunch of lovable and quirky characters meet up every Thursday at a retirement village to solve crimes that occurred long ago. After discovering that a murder has taken place within the broader community, they decide to investigate the crimes and solve the whodunits. The story is filled with British humour and an understated charm. Within the story world, there are numerous characters that are interesting and sort of quirky in their own rights, but what stands out the most is the team of amateur sleuths that are trying to solve the crime. And I think it is because they're old and they're living in a retirement village, and they've all lived interesting lives, and they've all got, secrets. You get a sense that they have secrets. I'm trying to differentiate between this book and the second book, which I've also read now, and I think I might be blending the stories together, but the characters are really interesting, and you definitely do find out more about them in the next book, but you get a sense of there's more to them than the first impression you get, because I always said than meets the eye, and I thought that sounds very Transformers-esque. But anyway, thank you for watching or listening to this list of my favourite mystery and thriller novels of 2021. As always, I have a few important questions to ask you. Have you read any of the books on my list? And if so, what did you think of the story? What was your favourite read from the previous year? Let me know by coming over to the blog post at author80hey.com/TBN009 and share your thoughts in the comments section. Or alternatively, join the brand new Book Nerd Reader Club Facebook group and start a discussion. There's a link in the show notes and on the blog post to this group so you can find it easily. Thanks for listening and happy reading, book lovers. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Book Nerd podcast. If you're new to this podcast or want to be notified about more episodes just like this, then click the subscribe button right now. You can find episode show notes and lots more information at ameliadhay.com/book-nerd. I'm your host, Amelia D. Hay, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time for another episode. Happy reading, everybody.